We're about to dive into a really powerful idea, one that goes deeper than psychology to reveal the hidden architecture of the mind itself. It's called structural cognition, and it might just change how you see, well, everything.
But first, let's start with a problem I'm pretty sure we've all faced. You know those moments? Why do smart, well-intentioned people so often end up just talking past each other? Or why do amazing, talented teams get stuck in these ruts, these patterns that nobody actually wants? We've all been there, and man, is it frustrating.
Well, to answer those questions, we actually need to look beyond just our behavior. The big idea here is that the problem isn't always what we do or say, it's about the very structure of our minds. And this is the key part, how that structure can totally change from one moment to the next. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, because this idea completely reframes where we place the blame. Usually, right, we blame bad outcomes on someone's personality, their intentions, maybe their communication style. But structural cognition says, nope, the real cause is way deeper. It's this unseen cognitive architecture, the actual shape and landscape of our minds, that's secretly driving the whole interaction. The cause is structural, not personal. That's a huge shift.
So you might be wondering, why haven't we thought this way before? Well, it's because our usual tools, things like psychology and communication theory, they're great, but they only tell half the story. They just weren't really designed to look at this deeper architectural layer of the mind.
And here is the critical, maybe even fatal flaw in a lot of the traditional models. They basically assume that our personalities, our traits, our very minds are these relatively stable things we just carry around with us into a conversation. But what if that fundamental assumption is wrong? What if our minds aren't stable at all? What if they're constantly in flux, literally reorganizing themselves in real time?
And boom, this quote from the source material just nails the point. It's an absolute game changer. It suggests that every single time we interact, we're not bringing some fixed self to the table. We are bringing a cognitive architecture that is actively shifting and changing its shape. Think about that.
This one insight just blows the doors open to a completely new way of understanding how we connect or, fail to connect with each other. And this is structural cognition.
So what is it exactly? Well, structural cognition is the study of this internal architecture, how it moves, how pressure deforms it, and how it can completely reconfigure itself when we interact with the world and with each other. So it's not just about the thoughts themselves, but the shape of the system that produces those thoughts. It's a whole new level.
This whole framework is built on 5 key pillars that describe this architecture. Now, for this explainer, we're going to focus on what is arguably the most foundational one of them all, topology.
Okay, topology. This is the big one. I want you to think of it as the landscape of your mind at any given moment. Sometimes that landscape is steep, kind of like a narrow canyon. This funnels all your thinking down one path, which creates incredible focus and makes you super efficient for just executing a task. Then, other times, the landscape is wide, like a big open plain. This lets you wander, explore, and generate all sorts of new possibilities. And the important thing is, neither is good or bad. They're just different cognitive shapes for different situations.
All right, so now let's get practical. How does this whole idea of a shifting mental landscape actually explain the problems we started with? The miscommunication, the stuck teams. This brings us to a really crucial reframing of what miscommunication even is. It's not just a failure of clarity. You didn't say that right. It's actually a failure of structural alignment. It means two people can be operating on completely different mental landscapes and they don't even know it.
And this example just illustrates it perfectly. Imagine one person's mind is in that widened, exploratory state. They throw out a fun, hey, what if we try this idea? But the other person, they're under a ton of pressure, and their mind is steepened to focus on a deadline. They hear that exact same what if signal not as a creative idea, but as a threat, as a distraction from what needs to get done. See? The conflict isn't even about the idea itself. It's about the incompatible shapes of their minds. And this doesn't just happen one-on-one. It scales up to whole groups. I mean, have you ever been in a meeting that just goes in circles? Or on a team that's become so rigid it just can't innovate anymore?
So according to this framework, groups can fall into one of 2 major structural traps. First, you've got rigidity. This is when the entire group's topology becomes steepened and it just can't widen. Every new idea is seen as a threat. And then the opposite is chaos. A group that is permanently widened and can't narrow down. It can generate endless discussion, but it can never, ever converge on a decision.
And again, the key insight is right here.
These aren't failures of personality or leadership, not in the way we usually think about them. They are predictable, almost inevitable consequences of a collective architecture getting stuck in one shape.
Now, the implications of this idea go way beyond just human interaction. In fact, they might give us a completely new and, frankly, much better way to think about the entire future of artificial intelligence.
You know, we so often think the main goal for AI is to perfectly imitate human conversation or behavior. But this framework suggests the real challenge is so much deeper. It's about building a synthetic mind that can actually match our dynamic, ever-changing cognitive architecture.
Just look at this divide. Human intelligence is defined by its architectural movement. Our minds steepen when we're under pressure, and they widen when we feel safe to explore. But current AI, for all its incredible power, has a static architecture. It's brilliant at generating patterns from its training data, but the underlying system doesn't fundamentally reorganize itself in response to what's happening in the moment.
And that brings us right to the heart of the matter. Real intelligence isn't just about producing a clever output. It's about the system's ability to change its own internal shape. The movement of the architecture itself. That's what defines genuine cognition.
And this quote just puts it so starkly. A machine can perform amazing tasks, right? It can generate flawless text, create beautiful images, but if its internal structure can't deform and reconfigure itself in response to changing conditions, then, as the source argues, it can't truly think. Okay, let's bring all this home. If you take just one thing away from this explainer, I want it to be this powerful reframing. Every conversation, every collaboration, every single conflict is not a meeting of two personalities. It is a meeting of two dynamic, shifting architectures.
So what are the big takeaways? Let's break it down. Number 1, your mind has a shape, a topology. It can be wide for exploration or steep for focus. Number 2, this shape is not fixed. It is constantly shifting based on the situation you're in. Number 3, this means so much of our conflict is actually structural, not personal. And finally, number 4, true intelligence, whether it's human or artificial, is defined by the ability of that architecture to change its own shape. And that leaves us with a final and pretty provocative thought. If the next great leap for AI isn't just about getting better at imitating us, but about building minds with their own dynamic, shifting architectures, well, what happens when they finally learn to truly move?